Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo back here with Sam Monson. A very unprepared Sam because where's your laptop, man?
Well, no, I'm prepared. I'm just laptopless because.
Yeah. Well, usually we have our laptops here, so we have
Well, look,
references.
Microsoft Windows these days appears to be taking a rather militant approach to updates.
Don't talk poorly about them. They're all potential sponsors.
I'm just saying, other operating system providers that will remain nameless let you choose when you want to update your computer or not.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, there's an update available. When you have some time, feel free to update the computer, and it might work better. Windows appears to be like, I'm going to stop functioning now until you update me.
On a Monday morning.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it did that, and it's now been sitting at 27% updated for about the last half an hour.
Can we get somebody just checking on that? Because I think it
will.
goes quicker after a certain point. I think it'll be done. We just need it delivered.
So anyway,
during
this
the show.
is my makeshift laptop.
But that's a cell phone for those just listening.
But it's propped up, so it's now a laptop.
Yeah.
It's also just notified me that we're live on YouTube.
We are live on YouTube. Yeah, so welcome into our live viewers on YouTube. And you'll see we're old school here. We got hard copies everywhere. A lot of papers.
I'm not going to watch because I'm live on YouTube, but other people should.
Yeah, they should. So welcome into our live viewers. Welcome into those watching later on YouTube. And then, of course, everybody listening through your favorite podcast medium. Training camp has started, Sam, so there's a bunch of news. So here's what we're going to do for this week. Let's get through some of the big news and the things that have happened the last few days.
Okay.
And then Thursday, so this week, we're going to get back to our 2 per week podcast. Is that an okay promise?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll start with a division preview on Thursday. Any division you want to start with?
No.
All right. Well, maybe we'll see what people want.
Okay.
Whatever people want, we'll start with that division on Thursday. We'll go division by division and, leading up to the season.
All right. Sounds good.
Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. Any other banter?
So how did Kyler Murray get at K1 as his Twitter handle?
I don't know, Sam.
There's no way he's old enough for a start to be like one of the first adopters of Twitter.
Well, who else?
Like unless he had
K1?
it when he was 6 years old.
Who else wanted K1?
I'm sure it's a 2-digit Twitter handle.
Yes.
There's no way that wasn't already taken by somebody.
I don't know. Does everybody have like S1 and
Yeah.
every
I'm
letter?
sure somebody
one?
does.
I like it.
So he somehow managed to snag that.
There are reports that Kyler Murray looks as small as advertised.
Well, yeah.
That's the report.
I mean, he didn't grow. There was a funny video, though, where Steve Smith, I presume at the NFL Network's behest, because that's who he works for, right? Steve Smith?
Still, I believe so.
He went and did like a bit of content segment with Kyler Murray and said, asked him how tall he was.
Yeah.
Kyler Murray's like, come on. He's like, well, I'm 5'9" ⅕. That's what they called out when I did the combine stuff. And they went back to back, and the dude was like, "Oh, he's got you by a lot." And Steve Smith, you're telling me I might only be 5'8"?
Well, he's older.
Right, he shrunk.
Once you get into your 30s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he started shrinking.
So
that means, have we run a tape measure over you recently? Because you're listed at 6'10".
That's
but you're
right
pretty
listing.
old now, so you might only be like 6'7" or something.
I think we're properly listing at 6'10". Let's move on because I'm still 6'10". All right, there's a lot of news. There's a lot of stuff going on. Let's start with, you don't even have the rundown. You don't have the list.
No, I got nothing. I got papers, but the rundown is, you didn't print me a hard copy of the rundown of the podcast.
Sorry, I'll just direct you. I'll just
Okay.
drag you through the show here. New York Giants falling apart.
No wide receivers left.
No wide
None.
receivers left. Here's your depth chart. Look, you've got the hard copy of the depth chart here.
So,
Sterling Shepard
Gone.
is banged up.
Yep.
He's injured. Golden Tate,
Gone.
4-game suspension. Odell Beckham. Oh, shoot.
Yeah,
he's
gone. Already gone.
Yeah, he's already been gone. So,
Cross that one.
so what is left?
Cody Latimer, Darius Slayton, Alonzo Russell, Russell Shepard, which is just like Russell Shepard is just
Special teamer.
it's just like a changing of other names in the receiving corps to make up a new human.
That's exactly what
Benny
it is.
Fowler, Britton Golden, Alex Wesley, Reggie White Jr.
He's been tearing it
By
up
the
there.
way, that's a great move, right? You're the son of Reggie White. You don't play D-line. You play a different position that cannot possibly be compared
No,
to your
don't
dad.
set those high expectations.
Damari Scott, Amba Etta Tuwo.
That's a Tawo
Ottawa?
out of Syracuse.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
So it's not exactly
It's a disaster
the
is
greatest
what it is.
wide receiver core.
It's a bargain basement bucket in a local Target is what the Giants are currently throwing to.
But when they're healthy, having Golden Tate, Sterling Shepard, that's a pretty good pairing. You have Evan Ingram as a nice little tight end, Rhett Ellison as your blocking tight end.
And Saquon Barkley's going to get 172 catches.
In Barkley. So it's not the worst group of playmakers, but when you lose those top two guys, Golden Tate, Sterling Shepard, and we don't know exactly when Shepard will be back and healthy, it does look pretty rough. So what does this do strategically for the Giants with Eli Manning and Daniel Jones at quarterback?
Well, we were saying recently that the entire strategy should basically be Daniel Jones' development, right?
Right.
And there's no reason to keep Eli on the field unless you think that it would harm the development of Daniel Jones to throw him out early. I would say this raises the question of whether it would harm him because he's got nobody to throw to.
Yeah.
And at some point, it can't be good for a quarterback to put him out where he's not going to be able to read open receivers because they're not open.
Right.
Like, you can't really judge whether a guy is getting to the correct reads if nobody is getting open in the first place. If every time he looks up, regardless of where he's reading, the guy is covered. I would suggest that doesn't do his development any good, at which point shelve him until they have somebody to throw to.
And the offensive line still has some question marks. We do think, that mantra, creep back toward average. I think the Giants have a good shot to have at least a middle-tier offensive line this year. You have Nate Solder at left tackle, Mike Remmers at right tackle. I mean, they are the epitome of mid-tier tackles, usually. But then Will Hernandez expecting a jump from him in his second year at left guard. Kevin Zeitler comes in at right guard. He's one of the league's best. And then John Jalapio at center. Mm-hmm.
I think that interior could be pretty good.
Yeah, so I mean that's a not much improved unit, potentially improved unit. So they were moving in the right direction there. But yeah, the receiver questions are just through the roof. You just got to throw Eli out there.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, Eli, if he's going to do anything useful, it's going to be serving as a sacrificial lamb until you finally get somebody to throw to if you're actual quarterback or potential actual quarterback going forward.
You have a fantasy slant on Saquon Barkley then?
He's going to catch 7 million passes. But they're not going to go for very far because there's zero reason for any defense to respect the passing game.
I posted a stat last week because we track which read the quarterback essentially hit, right? Yeah. It's either the first read, which is, same side of the field, second read, which is working somewhere else. There's the scramble drill, which is self-explanatory, and then there's checkdowns. We put it into these very basic buckets, and Eli Manning was already, and I used a 3-year sample here, already one of the highest percentage of checkdowns, number 2 behind Blake Bortles over the last couple of years. Now, understand, the other bucket that we put him in is scheme. So a screen pass is a scheme play. That's not a check down because there's a lot of people in the Twitterverse who would think that every short pass is called a check down. Mm-hmm. A check down is literally when you go through your progressions and then you take essentially your last option.
You check it down to something other than what you intended to throw.
Right.
The screen is what you're intending to throw.
Exact. Great way to put it. So the fact that so Eli was actually third in my list. It was Blake Bortles at 11.2%. Deshaun Kaiser was over 10%. Eli Manning, 10% of his attempts were checkdowns. So that's on the more conservative end already. That number could be through the roof, and again, bodes well probably for Barkley, who's going to get those design screens and probably the checkdowns.
You know what's funny? As of right now, the Giants' best 2 wide receivers might be completely different positions.
Evan Ingram.
Their best 2 wide receivers right now might be tight end and running back.
Yeah. So that I think that puts a little bit of pressure on the play caller, right? Play callers have to exploit those matchups, move Ingram around, move Barkley around, and get both of those guys on linebackers and take advantage of their receiving skills.
Yeah.
And even if Sterling Shepard and Golden Tate are healthy, that's going to be a good strategy anyway. So Giants are not looking great right now.
No.
All right. Is that all you have on those guys?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. No wide receivers left.
What do you want to do next
Giants
on the rundown?
are in trouble.
What do you want to do next? We're going to have a lot of offensive tackle talk in a bit. We're going to touch on. I'll tell you what we're going to touch on. Right?
Yeah. Do that.
Bobby Wagner.
I don't know.
I should have done this at the top.
Right.
Very unprofessional. Bobby Wagner's.
Both for the people and for me.
I know, right? Bobby Wagner extended by the Seattle Seahawks, best linebacker in the league. A.J. Green goes down due to injury, so another wide receiver injury. Trent Williams, the Washington Redskins offensive tackle, he's holding out. That's a potential disaster in Washington. We'll break that down. And then Ezekiel Elliott as well, holding out. So we'll talk about some of those holdouts, but let's go to the A.J. Green injury since we're talking wide receivers. The Bengals, obvious top wide receiver. The silver lining last year is when A.J. Green got hurt. Tyler Boyd broke out, was fantastic. But if the Bengals are going to get anything out of their passing game, they need both of those guys.
Yeah.
And A.J. Green missing at least a portion of the beginning of the season. He's not out for the year.
6 to 8
pretty
weeks.
Significant. Yeah.
6 to 8 weeks, torn ankle ligaments.
From now, 6 to 8 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Or not during the season.
No. Yeah, from now.
Yeah,
like
just
it's a
making
6 to 8 week injury. That would be week 6 or 8. That's
I
a
understand.
thoroughly different thing.
No, I'm just clarifying.
I don't
for
think
everybody.
anybody was confused by that except you.
Definitely some people. There are some people that are confused by much simpler things than that.
You calling our listeners stupid?
No, I'm just saying in general.
Sounds a lot like that's what you were doing. Anyway, 6 to 8 weeks from now
Thank you.
with a torn ankle ligaments in a contact injury, right? People are whinging about the field up in Dayton, and like this was because somebody fell on his ankle. Like that's not that's weird. Anyway, yes, A.J. Green. So the Bengals have been at their best on offense when they've been able to find secondary and tertiary targets to A.J. Green, right? The foil to his goodness. But without him, it doesn't matter. Like, okay, Tyler Boyd might break out and other targets might emerge, but without him, nothing functions properly. So, yes, they desperately need him back. The good news for them is that it happened now, basically as soon as camp opened, not, halfway through camp and you miss a few more weeks of the regular season. So, first couple of weeks could be rough. I think it'll probably look a little bit better because the offense should look a little bit better just schematically. But, yeah, it's a huge blow to them if they have any realistic hopes going forward.
And, a little bit more pressure on John Ross heading into year 3, first-round pick. This is make or break time. And, is he at a point where he might not make it out of camp? It's
Yes.
a new regime. I think that's the biggest storyline in Cincinnati right now.
It's also an interesting – it's a nice time for it to happen in terms of if you want a guy missing the entirety of camp, it gives everybody else a huge amount of reps to emerge,
Yeah.
One of these guys buried down the depth chart that doesn't look like anything might be able to make a run because they're suddenly getting a whole ton of extra reps that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise if Green was healthy.
The silver lining.
Yeah,
I like it.
there you go.
Still think that the Bengals are at a point where having a bad season is not the worst thing in the world. I do think from a roster standpoint, they're in rebuilding mode. But I am, the whole McVay coaching tree. You have Zach Taylor there, and it's kind of like the whole Seattle cover 3 deal a couple of years ago, right? You've got this scheme or this system or this philosophy that starts somewhere, has success, and then it starts to float around the league, and it's not always easy to duplicate. I think that's a big story for the Bengals is how that system is going to operate.
I think this is a huge story for this season generally is how that system functions.
Right.
I've been saying that all offseason that I think this is a big year for that system. Everybody grabbed a whole bunch of Sean McVay disciples because that system took the league by storm. It looks phenomenal. The Rams were incredible last year. But the league has been taken by storm in the past by systems that come in. It's something new. Honestly, I expect the Cliff Kingsbury system to do something similar this year. Like year 1, that will have a ton of success because teams just aren't used to facing it. Years 2 and 3, NFL defenses are not dumb. They figure things out pretty quickly, and once they've got a year of tape on something, they understand how to defend it. So, we've seen other systems in the past start to slow down and actually get crippled pretty quickly once teams figure out what to do. Last year, we started to see teams take away what the Rams want to do. And I think there was, injuries played a part, and I think it started to mask the fact that teams actually figured out that offense and started to force them to plan B.
Yeah.
People are putting it down to other things like Cooper Kupp going down or Todd Gurley's, knee. Honestly, I think we started to see teams schematically figure out that offense, which is okay
Right.
if it evolves. But if it doesn't, if he just comes back this year, no changes, right? Let's just get better executing at the system. This will be a problem because teams will force them to go to plan B. And if you don't have plan B, you're not going to be the same force. So it's a big thing for the Rams going into this year. Hopefully they don't just think they're good and try and do it again. But it's also a big thing for every other coach or every other franchise that just hired a Sean McVay coach because all of those guys are porting over the same system. And if defenses have started to figure it out. They all need to figure out how to evolve it this offseason.
It's an interesting dynamic from what I've heard, dropping some what I've heard stuff.
Oh, wow.
It does seem like there's some self-awareness within the Rams building that, they need to get better in certain areas. But you hear a lot of this around the NFL, and to me, so that the Rams need to adjust to, say, too high type of sets and be able to beat teams in different ways. That's kind of like a macro thing that they need to improve upon, which makes sense. Like, that's something that they should focus the offseason on, and it sounds like they've put a lot of time and effort into that. So that will be a great storyline to track. I do think one of the big mistakes that teams make sometimes, this is a quick aside, is when they say, last year we lost 4 games by 1 score, therefore we need to get better at running on third and 1, or we need to get better at red zone defense, or whatever it is. They look at the reason that they lost last year, which is probably a really small sample size or something that's more of an anomaly, or it was injury-based or whatever it was, and they're like, that's the focus right now. That's the focus in camp. And, I think what they should be focused on is not so much what just happened last year, but understanding that last year is one small sample size season in itself, but get better at the big stuff. If you continue to get better at the big stuff, which passing game and run more play action and all these axioms that essentially we've come up with, I think that takes over for the little stuff. I think a lot of teams focus on the little stuff. We need to run the ball. And that's where they get these whole, every time we run the ball 25 times, we're 10-1. Well, no kidding. You're confusing, correlation causation.
Yeah.
So it's just, to me, it's just interesting hearing those tidbits and what teams are focused on and what they think they need to be focused on, which a lot of time it's like the micro view instead of the macro view.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly shouldn't be zeroing in on, if you're identifying reasons you lost in what is going to be a small handful of games and a small handful of plays within those games, you're automatically aiming at the wrong things. Yep. Whether that was true or not, that's not how you're going to be better this year, because this year is going to present a completely different set of reasons why you lose games. We're talking about, like, just the NFL, the league, the game is too fickle for you to dial in on single specific plays and deem that as the reason you win or lose games.
It's also just this weird dynamic, too, because as a coach, you feel the need to coach up toughness, or to coach up mental toughness, or to coach up the ability to win close games. How many times does a coach have a rough season and the next year they win a bunch of close games and it's like, yeah, we're learning how to win. We're learning how to finish. So from coach speak, you feel like you've done better. I do feel like the future of the NFL will be coaches who are able to step back and properly understand and properly allocate what wins games. And even so, you go 5-1 in close games, and instead of acknowledging, we've got some toughness, we know how to close out games, you acknowledge, actually, that's going to be tough to sustain next year. In those same situations, we'll probably go 3-3 instead of 5-1. So we need to get better at some bigger picture stuff. I think the biggest mistakes in the NFL are when teams think, okay, everything last year that was good will remain the same, and then we'll just improve these other things and we'll get better. Mm-hmm. Because every team's thinking that. Every team thinks they're going to get a little bit better. All right. Quick aside, I hijacked it, but I think it's a key point. Let's move on to Bobby Wagner. He's extended by the Seattle Seahawks. We think it's a good move. Do you remember where he ranked in WAR? I think he was the most valuable defensive player behind Aaron Donald last year. Is that right?
So Eric posted this on a tweet recently that said, I can't remember what the time frame was, but I think over the last 2 or 3 seasons, he's been the most valuable defensive player in the NFC West. The NFC West contains Aaron Donald. So
we'll need to confirm that, but here's why.
Hang on, I can use my laptop and figure out. Let me find.
Is Sam's laptop ready? Can somebody deliver Sam's laptop to the studio, please?
Let me find.
Let somebody go check on that. Can anybody hear me and actually check on that? We'll just see. We'll see how professional we really are.
To be honest.
So Bobby Wagner's last 2 seasons: 91.4 grade in 2017, 91.8 in 2018. We ranked him in the top 10 in the PFF 50 heading into the season. We've ranked him as the top linebacker, slightly overtaking Luke Kuechly. Mm-hmm. And it's because of the all-around game that Bobby Wagner's bringing to the table. Coverage grades over 90 the last 2 years. So when you're talking about value, that's huge. Even his pass rush grades in the 80s and 90s, because he's brought 32 pressures over the last couple of years. So when he does blitz, he does it efficiently. And the number I like last year, 7 pass breakups and an interception. 2017, 5 pass breakups, 2 interceptions. He makes plays on the ball at linebacker, which is extremely valuable. So the other thing you have to talk about.
Got it. Laptop
What do you have?
comes up trumps.
You did?
It's actually George that tweeted it, and then Eric retweeted it. See?
Oh.
So,
Give
Bobby
Robert
Wagner
credit.
was the most valuable defensive player in the NFC West over the last 3 seasons. So
Over Aaron Donald.
Over Aaron Donald's peak 3-year period, Bobby Wagner was more valuable because coverage is more valuable than pass rush in our findings. And
So-
Bobby Wagner is as good a coverage player as anybody in the league. He may be playing linebacker, but he's covering as well as anybody in football, and that has made him more valuable, albeit close.
And I think this is a good aside because this is kind of the multifaceted way that we have to look at the game here at PFF. To me, there's 3 different ways of breaking that down. It's how well did a guy play? And when we talk about that, Aaron Donald's the king. He's the best player in the NFL
By a distance.
but regardless of position, he does his job better than anybody else. Then there's the value component. Here, the laptop might be.
Producers just told
Might be
us
delivered.
that a laptop is heading
So
our way.
professional. Can't wait.
I
Well,
don't,
you
I
might
don't,
not even
right,
need it.
I don't need it. I have a phone here that's
No.
excelling my laptop.
Plus, the laptops are proportional right now.
Look at this.
We have a laptop delivered. There you go. Thank you, sir.
Now I got 2 laptops.
So we've got the how well a guy played. That's evaluation, right?
Did it
How?
change my background picture ahead of that?
All right, we're not complaining about Windows right now.
I
You
mean,
just get what you need up there.
I am.
Plus, you got just live off the hard copies. That's fine. So we've got the valuation, the evaluation component. Then there's the valuation component, which I think is how valuable is that level of play. So while Aaron Donald has been the best player, we have numbers that are suggesting that Bobby Wagner has played his position at a pretty high level as well, and it is more valuable. And then there's the component as the other piece of valuation is how much is that worth. So investing in players that are valuable, play at a high level, and are valuable obviously is a good thing for the Seattle Seahawks defense, especially a pass coverage unit that has some major question marks on the perimeter. Shoring down, locking down that middle with Bobby Wagner makes a ton of sense. The other number that I think just is always mind-blowing when you look at Bobby Wagner's missed tackles,
He doesn't
5.
miss them, ever.
5 over the last 2 years, and we have him with 216 solo tackles. We track it differently from the NFL.
And 3 of those came in a stretch where he was playing with a busted-up shoulder late in the season.
Late in 2017.
Right.
Yep.
Like
so
he
5
basically didn't miss a
misses.
tackle until he got an injured shoulder, which is, what you use to tackle people. So that's pretty understandable.
So Bobby Wagner's fantastic. We don't normally suggest investing heavily in linebackers. We thought the C.J. Mosley deal by the New York Jets was a little questionable, that type of money for a guy that's a pretty good, not great linebacker. Bobby Wagner's a great linebacker, a valuable one, great deal.
Yeah, and
for the
a
Seattle
great
Seahawks.
coverage linebacker, whereas
Yes.
C.J. Mosley is not.
Very important. All right, let's discuss the NFC East now to wrap things up. Starting with the Zeke holdout. Ezekiel Elliott is holding out, and the fascinating discussion here for the Dallas Cowboys. We've talked a little bit about Dak Prescott's contract. We've talked a little bit about Zeke. I think ultimately they sign both guys. I think it's in the nature of the Cowboys to want to keep guys that they perceive as stars. And Zeke is a star in the NFL, but we keep coming back to what wins games. He's not even the most valuable running back, and he's not completely replaceable, but we think they all kind of are.
This would take an incredible amount of self-restraint and sort of vision and bravery from the Dallas Cowboys organization to turn down Zeke and say, okay, you are a great player, but we know that you are not as valuable to us in terms of winning games than as the money you want. So therefore, we're going to walk away from this negotiation and let you find your money from somewhere else. Every piece of data we have suggests that's the right move to make, but it's not one I expect them to make, and it's not one I'd expect most teams to make. I think we're just not there yet of NFL teams being that brave to say, you know what, we know that this is the right move, and therefore we're going to turn it down. It's like the fourth down stuff a few years ago. Even though you know that mathematically it's the right move to make, we're just not at a point yet where NFL teams were doing it.
Yeah,
now we're starting to get there.
Right.
And actually, the things have swayed towards that point. With all this stuff in terms of money and negotiating and running backs, we haven't hit that point yet.
I think the dynamic here is the fact that Dak Prescott is sitting there as a mid-tier quarterback, right? Where I think everybody acknowledges, okay, he's not a top 10 guy right now. He had one season where he was kind of top 10-ish his rookie year, but even then, they ran the ball so much that they feel like that's what protects Dak Prescott. So I think it's, if you had to invest around him, there's a big part of the league that thinks you have to do it with the running game the same way that you have with Zeke. I think where I would go with it is Dak has shown to be pretty good when you give him more open throws. And this is every quarterback. When you give them more opportunities to hit open throws, when you scheme it up or have guys who can get open, passing production goes through the roof, especially when you have a quarterback in that middle tier. I would take the investment money and say, okay, Amari Cooper is a good start. He knows how to separate on the outside. Let's continue to get guys that are mismatches, that know how to get open, that can control the middle of the field, that can control every level of the field, and you win and lose with the passing game. And that's how you build around Dak Prescott, because everything that our numbers say about what happens with a successful running game, Dallas already has the components before Zeke even takes the field, because they have that good offensive line that can run. Plus you have Dak as a running threat. And I'm not saying you want to use him 15 times a game as a runner, but he's at least a running threat. That helps the arithmetic at the line of scrimmage as well, because, again, rushing success is based off of offensive line run blocking success, and it's based off of box count. And you can manipulate box count if you do have a running threat at QB.
This is a really quick aside as well, but did you see that somebody, Brian Billick, put it to John Harbaugh that the highest single season total in terms of carries for a quarterback or for Cam Newton was 136 or something?
Yeah.
And he said, hammer the over, essentially,
on
for
Lamar Jackson. Yeah.
So Lamar's going to die.
Well, but listen, that's what we said I think needed to happen. Lamar
it does, yeah,
is the bottom-tier quarterback.
He needs to learn how to protect himself, otherwise he's not lasting 16 games.
He's got to take fewer hits. But we said you have to build the running attack around
and
Lamar.
They know that, yeah.
And that's the same idea, though, because you can create open throws off of
the Ravens are going to be fascinating to watch because they're doing it in a different way. And I'm a big fan of pretty much any NFL team just saying, you know what, we're going to do it in a different manner. Whether it works or not, I'm just endlessly entertained by that. It's the same reason I loved watching Georgia Tech games, because they ran the triple option and pretty much nobody else did, right? And I would way prefer to watch that than another generic, the same spread option offense.
The Ravens do it differently on both sides of the ball.
Right. So I'm a big fan of that. So the Zeke thing, right? I think we need to sort of break this down stage by stage and explain to people the thought process, right? Mm-hmm. Because Zeke is an exceptionally good running back, and therefore, so there's, he's an exceptionally good running back. You should pay him because exceptionally good players get paid, right? The first thing I think a lot of people will say is he is so good that he dictates heavier box counts and he opens up play action because your linebackers are concentrated on Zeke. They're coming downhill. They're trying to stop the run, and that helps out Dak. But from all the data, it's that play action works independently. It's not – play action is not determined by the running back in the backfield. It's just not.
Now, real quick, there were some guys on ESPN. I think Bobby Carpenter, Dan Orlovsky were breaking down those actual numbers, play action with and without Zeke. And there was a bit of a difference.
There's definitely a trend, yeah.
That it was more effective with Zeke on the field. Mm-hmm. And our response to that would be, we're talking how many games that he missed? He had 6 in 20.
But the sample size was like less than a game's worth of plays.
The sample size is so small. They did actually run less play action when Zeke was on the field, when he was injured, right? And that's Dallas in their head thinking, well, how could we possibly run play action? They don't respect our running backs, when the reality is it hasn't historically mattered who's back there. Play action does work no matter what. So it was a small sample size that it was better with Zeke than without.
A huge amount of the numbers associated with Zeke Elliott are self-fulfilling, self-perpetuating things because Dallas believes those things, or the Dallas play callers believe those things, right? So at the point where the coaching staff believes that, they start to pre-select the data points for you, because that's what they think. Therefore, they're going to call plays that way. Therefore, the numbers start to skew towards that because they're calling those plays in that way. So if you look at it on a macro level, it's impossible to find any evidence in the NFL that the running back makes a difference to the effectiveness of play action, right?
Right.
Now, if you could dial it in to small enough sample sizes and to specific situations where coaches and play callers start to pre-select the plays you're looking at, you can find trends that make that look like it is. But on a big level, it doesn't seem to make that difference. The other thing is the box count can essentially be determined by the offense, right? If you line up in 11 personnel, you will face a light box count. The Rams, who had Todd Gurley, who, was Zeke caliber for a while in people's perceptions, they basically spent their entire time running their offense in 11 personnel. That was that was their base. They ran
that's 3 wide receivers.
Yes.
1 tight end.
1 back. They ran it 90+% of their plays. Therefore, Todd Gurley faced the lightest box count of pretty much any top quality, top tier back because the offense dictates it. Now, if you were looking at it and say, well, that's Todd Gurley, we should load up the box. You can't do that if they run 11 personnel because there's an extra wide receiver out there you need to cover.
Right.
So you physically can't do that
Then
if you want to. Right. Then they just hit the open slot receiver for 25 yards.
Right.
So this whole thing of, well, Zeke is dictating heavier box counts. He isn't, because if you run 3 wide receivers, the box count will be light, regardless of whether Zeke is the back or not.
And that's one of those odd things that so the analytics guys help us to maybe understand the game a little bit differently. Here's one of the things they open my eyes up to. When you do have that, even if he does bring a heavier box count, the fact that you're still running into it is the mistake, because you drafted Zeke at 4 overall. You feel the need to get him 25 touches because when Zeke has 25 touches, they win, right? So those essentially are wasted plays. They had negative EPA last year, expected points added, when running the ball last year. And over the last 4 years, only 4 teams have had positive EPA when running the ball. The Cowboys are one of them. But even the most efficient rushing teams are still less efficient than the worst passing teams. That's the whole dynamic here, just at a macro level. But here's the point. Listen, the fact that they feel the need to give a guy 20 carries, especially against loaded boxes, leads to, if you only have 60 to 70 plays in a game, you're going to waste 15 or 20 of those,
right,
justifying the need to get the ball to the guy rather than taking what the defense gives or dictating to the defense. We just want to run the most efficient play.
If the running back is in fact manipulating the box count the way people think they are by them being that good, the best way that would manifest itself is in the passing game. The running back should never get the ball into the teeth of those heavier box counts. All he should be doing is creating a heavier box count, which you use to pass the ball more efficiently because the extra defenders aren't there. The other thing that we need to make clear is that from all of our data, again, the quality of the offensive line and the running back, or the run blocking rather, is far more tightly correlated to rushing success than the ability of the running back, which means that as good as Zeke Elliott is, when this Dallas Cowboys offensive line is on song, they're able to turn Darren McFadden into a 1,000-yard rusher and a running, a number 1 fantasy running back.
Right.
Because it's the offensive line opening up these huge holes that pretty much any NFL caliber back can run through successfully.
And we've
so
seen
again,
this.
You don't pay Zeke, you pay the blockers.
We've seen this year over year. It's Alfred Morris a couple years ago, Rod Smith. When they filled in, they
now they're not as
admirably.
good,
no,
but they're able to do Zeke's job to the point where it's as beneficial for the offense.
And that was C.J. Anderson last year with the
no
Rams
drop-off
instead of Todd Gurley. The basic concept is there is a difference in skill level. I keep coming back to this, sum it up point about the whole running back thing. There's a difference in skill level, and Zeke's skills are among the best in the league. He has 3-down running back ability. He can catch the ball. He can block. He's a very good runner. He's a good zone runner. He's a good fit for their scheme. But the difference in skill doesn't always show up in production. That's why running backs are holding out and not getting paid.
One more point I would make, because this uses elusive rating, which I invented, Steve, way back when.
Yeah.
Which the math guys, the geniuses out there, the data scientists, have said is our most stable running back metric. More stable than any standard metric.
The rest of the stats are so bad.
The one I created.
Yeah.
With a spreadsheet, because that's what I do. So elusive rating is essentially my attempt using very rudimentary math.
They haven't fixed that math yet?
Look, the math is sound. It's just,
All right, anyway. Go ahead. Elusive rating.
It's an attempt to distill what the running back does from the effects of the blocking and all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
So it factors in broken tackles, both in the run and the pass game. It factors in yards after contact, that kind of stuff, versus basically per touch, right?
Right.
Per carry and or reception. Zeke in 2018 was 35th. So he will get decent yardage, and he will earn some ugly yards, always falls forward a couple of yards, that kind of thing. But he's not one of these guys that breaks a tackle and takes it 50 yards for a touchdown. He'll get run down from behind by a linebacker, which is not good.
Well, even those highlights that we were watching on NFL
Right.
Network the other day, there were plays where it's like, okay, they run duo. They run duo. He kicks it outside, which
Explain
is a normal
what that
read.
is.
So essentially, the offensive line's essentially trying to block down or create some double teams
Right.
on the interior,
Big
block
wedge
down on the
blocks
edges.
at the point.
The running back's read is the middle linebacker. If the middle linebacker stays, he bounces it outside the tight end. If the middle linebacker stays outside, he just kicks it inside and usually gets 2, 3, 4, 5 yards.
Right.
The kick outside is pretty common. Zeke hit it. It was wide open. And this is just NFL Network talking about Zeke, or maybe
Right.
it was when you were on. Was it when you were on?
It could have
Howard?
been, yeah. These are just the random plays that they throw up as highlights, while
Yeah.
people are talking.
So as you were talking about Zeke and his limited value, I'm watching him kick it outside to this wide open run, which he turned into about a 35, 40-yard gain. But it's like, man, if this was Jamal Charles or somebody with some breakaway
these
speed,
were the
that's
plays
60.
that Adrian Peterson made a career
Yeah.
out of. The Vikings offensive line would cause this mess at the point. Adrian Peterson would see it, bounce, get to the outside, and bam, he's gone.
Right.
So Ezekiel Elliott,
Elucidating.
35th. Yes. Nick Chubb was second. Kareem Hunt, 4th. Saquon, 8th. Melvin Gordon, 9th. Like, the guys that we're talking about, the other great backs, they do a lot of this stuff. They do a lot of the dirty work. They break more tackles. They make you more yards after contact with that breakaway speed. Zeke Elliott isn't, which begs the question, let's assume you pay Zeke all this money. Now the offensive line starts to fall apart because you don't have the money to invest in it. Is he going to be able to carry a worse offensive line? I mean, the data suggests no.
Yeah. So ultimately, we do think they'll end up paying Zeke, but buyer beware on this whole thing when you're pointing toward winning games, not necessarily keeping your fan base happy. I know there's other things that go into this whole decision for the Cowboys. All right, let's wrap it up. Staying in the NFC East, Trent Williams, left tackle, is holding out.
Yeah.
And that has left Eric Flowers. You're done with that?
Yeah, that one's done.
What if I want to reference that? You can't just throw the hard copies away. We'll just throw
just
away
did.
There's the Giants depth chart. We don't need
get
that
rid of
anymore.
too. I got to try and get it away from the mic so people don't see
Can
this
you-
unprofessional. Well, I got like
you
a
shoot?
chair in the way. No.
Very unprofessional, Sam. All right. Washington Redskins.
Yeah.
Eric Flowers has been taking first-team reps, speaking of the Giants, former Giant. He's been taking first-team reps at left tackle. So I printed out some of our nice, trusty pass protection stats over the last couple of years. I'll start with this one.
What is this, over 2 years?
This is over 3 years.
3
This
years.
so you can actually see the
Oh,
right
I
out of
see.
PFF
Yeah,
Ultimate.
Yeah,
Ultimate is our internal database where you could basically find anything you want.
yeah. And
Answer any
most
question.
of the same data is available in premium stats.
And premium stats, you could go and see, okay, pass protection stats, pressure percentage over the last 3 years. Just not even looking at grade. Grade actually tells a better story. But Trent Williams in pressure percentage, 18th best in the NFL. That's 4.9%
All right.
of the time he
in
allowed pressure.
our PFF top trumps, I can beat that because in pass protection grade, Trent
Fifth.
Williams is 5th.
Nice.
I win. What else you got?
Well, where was Eric Flowers? I'm looking for Eric. Okay, Eric Flowers in pressure percentage. Well, Trent Williams was 18th. Eric Flowers was 82nd.
Ooh.
8.8% pressure, so almost
'Kay.
twice as many pressures per snap.
So you win this one because in pass blocking grade, Eric Flowers is 55th. Tied for 55th.
Okay, so that's not as bad, but it's not great.
Still pretty catastrophic.
So it's
going from 5th to 55th.
It's one of those things where we always say, hey, if you're an offensive line, creep back toward average,
Right,
right?
I mean-
if you're a mid-tier line,
Bear in mind there
You can
are
do it.
64 starting tackles in the NFL, and ideally you want your best one to be on the left side. Eric Flowers is at best 55th out of 64.
doesn't matter where your best one is, actually. But
Well,
no,
it
listen,
kind of does.
here's the Redskins' offensive line as of now. Trent Williams at left tackle if he's there.
Mm-hmm.
Eric Flowers could be the starting left guard. Chase Rollier at center. Brandon Scherf at right guard. Morgan Moses at right tackle. If you have Moses is solid, Scherf is good, and Trent Williams is one of the best. He's 2
Yeah.
years removed from being the best
Yes.
in the league. He's not. He hasn't gone back to that point. but he's in our world a low to mid 80s graded PFF tackle for the most part over the last few years. That's a top 10 offensive tackle. So if you have a line that's 3/5 good to really good, and then a couple question marks, like you could deal with that in today's NFL. Once Trent Williams, so even though you don't need an elite left tackle in today's NFL, like people think, once you remove him from the equation, that line looks like they're in trouble.
Iffy, yeah. But I know he's missed time over that period, but Williams has also only given up 3 sacks over those 3 years.
Right.
That's pretty important.
The other guy that potentially could, see some time, Jerron Christian was a 2018 third rounder. He only has 43 career snaps, and we saw extended play from him last year, 45.4 grade during the preseason. That's the only time that we saw extended time is what I meant to say.
If you're grading that badly in the preseason, that's awful.
What I meant to look up here is how many pressures, because he gave up 15 pressures in the preseason alone.
Yeah.
On 125 attempts.
That's pretty catastrophic.
Trent Williams gave up 30 pressures last year during the season.
Yeah, the NFL season.
Just as
actual NFL.
And he gave up the previous year 17 pressures and 16 the year before. Again, he missed a little bit of time, but that was on far more snaps. Just for perspective as far as how big the drop-off would be.
At the very minimum, the Redskins should be looking at Donald Penn. Like, honestly, he should be in the building at this point in camp, seeing if he's a better option than Eric Flowers, because how could he not be?
Yeah, so Donald Penn, those numbers that I printed out include his move to right tackle last year, which was a disaster. He's 36. He's getting a little bit older, but there might be something left there. If you keep him a left tackle where he's more comfortable, Donald Penn was a very good tackle for quite a while, creeping up in that top 10 range.
Because the Redskins are they're in a similar spot to the Giants in terms of they need to think about their quarterback's development.
Right.
And their quarterback, Dwayne Haskins, first rounder. They've got Case Keenum and Colt McCoy also in the building. But you need to develop Dwayne Haskins, right? And the one area that we saw that was vaguely concerning about Haskins was once you moved him off his spot in college.
Yes.
In the pocket, from a clean pocket, he's fantastic. And that is great news because that is the stable, translatable, predictive thing about quarterback play. But when you moved him off his spot, things were ugly. They were disastrous, in fact, which, is going to happen sometimes. But ideally, you would like to make that happen as little as humanly possible. And losing one of the best left tackles in football will make that happen a lot more.
Yeah. So, Washington, I do think it's really tough. This is when fans are most optimistic right now. Everybody's excited. It's training camp. Everybody has the best case scenario in mind, which is Jerron Christian becomes a good left tackle, and everybody just maximizes their potential. But I do think realistically Washington is in this 2 and 3 year mode where it's like, all right, if we can just get a few more playmakers around Dwayne Haskins.
What we should have done
better
for this,
offensive line.
What we should have done for this podcast? If I'd had a laptop and been able to prepare it before, we should have done like a sort of almost like a PFF bingo of training camp / preseason, like optimistic lunacy that appears every year.
Oh yeah.
So like this is Dante Moncrief's year. I've already seen that so far this year.
Oh, that would have been.
You even know where he is right now? That this is going to be his breakout?
Yeah, I remember. It's Pittsburgh.
Right, Pittsburgh. So this is Dante Moncrief's year.
Ryan Tannehill had 8 straight breakout seasons.
It's going to be like 21-38. The man has been at war with the machines for the last 100 years, and we're still going to be getting Dante Moncrief preseason breakout hype. I just told this to some guy. I would be staggered if Deontay Johnson wasn't better than Dante Moncrief this year as a rookie right out of the gate.
And Deontay had a nice little clip.
Right. There's just anyway. So Dante Moncrief breakout hype would be one. There'll be a ton of these things. Like you could print out a whole.
You should set up this game because you love being a wet blanket.
All right, we'll do it
optimism.
Thursday. We'll do it Thursday.
All right,
as part of our preseason.
We'll see.
Thing.
We're going to preview a division on Thursday. Let us know on Twitter at PFF_Steve and at PFF_Sam.
Also, throw more of these preseason hype cliches at me.
Yeah, what are the hype cliches? What do we see every single year? I saw Tom Brady went 0 for 4 the other day. The cliff has hit.
Yeah.
Your prediction finally came true. All right, let's wrap it up. We got to go. We got a meeting at 10 a.m. So we're out. Hard out. Tell everybody what's going on at now PFF.com. No more ProFootballFocus.com.
PFF.com. We are full on fantasy season. The fantasy playbook version 2 is out now. I think there's a few iterations of this thing still to go. We're adding more with every iteration. There's some pretty awesome stuff in there. I say my sales pitch for this thing has been that it has information in it good enough to make you win an experts league. And God knows you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, I just spend a few hours researching our stuff, and then I pick the right players, and then I win. And honestly, I actually put so little effort in during the season. I just draft really well.
Right.
Based off our stuff.
So go in, get yourself your PFF fantasy playbook. It's all part of your PFF. Well, Elite's the package you want to get because that gets you the fantasy stuff. It gets you premium stats. You can see how everybody's doing. It gets you 365 days of access. It gets you green line so you can make the money back during the season. So that's the sneaky thing.
Is the way to go. So go check it out, PFF.com. We'll be back on Thursday previewing a mystery division, getting ready for that 2019 season.